Welcome to season 2 of Graft Under Watch. It is a podcast that is brought to you by the National Prosecuting Authority, the NPA. And as you know, from season 1, you will know that the focus of this podcast is on corruption, organized, complex, and serious commercial crimes. So here on Graft Under Watch, our aim is to enhance public understanding, awareness, as well as education and involvement in the work that the country's prosecuting authority is doing in pushing back against the scourge of corruption, organized, complex, and serious commercial crimes. We're doing things slightly differently in season 2. For starters, we are live. And we're live on all our digital platforms, being Facebook, X, YouTube, LinkedIn, and so on, and all the others. So we are live. And of course, a bit later on, we'll be taking some of your inputs and your own questions that you would want to pose to our guest, whom I will reveal in just a moment. It's only apt, in fact, getting to that, it's only apt that we start season 2 right at the top and with an overview and a focus on the strategy and leadership and future direction of the National Prosecuting Authority. Who better to help us do that than the newly minted National Director of Public Prosecutions, Advocate Andy Mothibi, who joins me now for that conversation. Good morning. It's great to be in your company.
Good morning. Good morning, Tulas. It's a pleasure to really be invited to come and talk to you on this very important topic of Graft Under Watch.
Yeah. I was saying to you off air that you didn't have to make a great trek across town, across cities, across the province. You literally just crossed a couple of streets from the SIU to the NPA.
No, indeed. As I said, it was actually geographically convenient.
Yeah.
We didn't have to travel long, and that really says a lot in terms of the proximity and the collaboration that makes it to be able to collaborate with ease. I'm able to walk across to my colleagues at SIU and give them an update on the cases that they've referred to NPA, and our colleagues at the DPCI, the Hawks, are also
not far from
few streets away. So geographically, I think they were sort of deliberately positioned such that the collaboration becomes easy. So I'm able to go across if matters have been referred to DPCI and find out where they are. But not being far from SIU, my colleagues that side still think that it will be easy to get me back. To come and say, no, you're not far. You can come back. But we're here, and I've really been working well with the team here, just to ensure that we rethink some of the strategic areas.
We'll get to the essence of the work you've been doing since your appointment in January. But when you were appointed, I was jokingly saying that when you were referring a whole lot of cases to the NPA for consideration for prosecution while you were at SIU, you didn't know you were throwing all of that for yourself to only pick up on the other side.
Indeed. That's the sort of ironical. It's the very interesting part. And indeed, I've found those cases on my table, as you correctly say. But we're working really hard with the team here to ensure that we action those referrals, because it is important. It makes business sense and makes public interest sense to act on those matters. Public resources have been invested at SIU on the investigations of those matters. And I know that we do refer, tons and tons of, evidentiary material to the NPA. So we need to really give the public value for money so that we indicate where those matters are. As you correctly said, I mean, the focus really for the country is on crime and corruption, and in the criminal justice system. That is amongst others, but prioritized
Yeah.
is organized crime, and corruption is part of the organized crime. So we really need to focus on that.
So let's talk then NDPP. President Ramaphosa makes the announcement in January this year. This is after a thorough search for the next NDPP, and ultimately his decision is to appoint you 5 months into the job.
Yep.
What's the state of the NPA overall? What are the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats that you have found in the time that you've been here?
Right. No, thank you for that question. When I got in, of course, I got to understand the business better. At least it's the business that I understand. Having been a prosecutor and a magistrate before, I understand the criminal justice.
Full circle.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. You wouldn't have put it any better.
Yeah.
Having started as a prosecutor and ending up as a prosecutor, albeit in the leadership role.
Sure.
So I really found an organization that is at work. Committed prosecutors, committed administrators here. And I say so because I've been able to determine that. And again, it's demonstrated by the results that we have publicized when we did our public statement somewhere around, I think it was March, thereabout.
Yes.
So if you see the results, I mean, the conviction rate, it's averaging around 75-80%. Some go into more than 80%, right? Our current organizational performance, although it's not audited yet, it's sitting at 94%, right? So this is really an organization that is at work.
Yeah.
Of course, in terms of the strengths, we've got very committed, prosecutors and administrators, because NPA, you've got the NPA side, and then you've got the administration side.
Yes.
Those who are under the Public Service Act, because we are a program in the Department of Justice. And again, time permitting, we'll go into the corporatization of the NPA that we are hard at work to achieve.
We definitely come into that.
Thank you.
The institutional independence.
That's right.
Yeah.
So these are the really people who have delivered on these results. Of course, we then, I had an opportunity to go into a leadership planning session and strategic session. We all sort of got on one page in terms of the strategic direction of the organization, the objectives, strategic focus areas. I looked at them, of course, to satisfy myself whether there are others that I need to add or subtract, for that matter. But we are really agreed that the strategic focus areas that they have worked on are relevant, pointed, that will reposition or continue to position NPA as a performing organization. Of course, as we now refocus, amongst others, is to ensure that the messaging to the public is such that the public understands really the impact and the results that we produce. So amongst others, we are focusing on strategic communication, which my colleagues, Bulelwa Makeke and Kaiser Khanyaho, and of course, Advocate Mtunzi Maga, who has really been doing quite a good work in terms of supporting the communication while he's doing the legal work.
Yes.
So we need to continue to improve on the communication strategy such that the message reaches the public on what we are doing. The results that I'm talking about, that they are good, we need to really translate them into a manner where the public understands.
Why is that important?
It is important because from time to time, you get the public, really giving out a perception that, nothing much is being done by the NPA. There's those quarters of the public that are really still asking, on the results of NPA. So it is important to package the communication such that is understood by all audiences in the public. And depending on the audience that you speak to, we need to speak the language that will land and impactfully, and them understanding the results of NPA. That will really help us in terms of public understanding that we are really executing the mandate. There's some of the communications that we communicate even internally, which we will start taking from internal and then packaging them to the externals. Because the internal colleagues understand and they can follow, but the same message need to be taken out.
So you recently had the appointments of 2 deputy national directors of public prosecutions. That was just confirmed. Just talk to me about the leadership structure. When I looked at your structure, I think there's a 3rd position that remains vacant. But where does that leave you in terms of the focus areas following those appointments?
I'm really pleased that the president appointed those deputy national director of public prosecutions. They're very important positions in terms of just strengthening the stability of the organization. We've appointed the deputy NDPP on the asset forfeiture side, and the deputy NDPP on the National Prosecution Service. The National Prosecution Service is, both of them are core, but the National Prosecuting Service is almost like your COO, who really drives the operations of the business. So it was very, very critical that we really do that permanent appointment. And it's very important now, at least as I said, to strengthen the stability. We know there's permanence, and then we can drive the strategy appropriately. They can take decisions knowing that, it's from a permanent accountability. As you said, there's one role that was filled before and is still absent, is still vacant. Is from the strategy, operations and compliance side,
SOC.
right? SOC, yes. So we'll continue to look for an appropriate person who can occupy that role, because it is equally important. At the moment, we've got the acting deputy director general who is acting in that role. In that role. So we will be ensuring that is filled at the moment. In terms of the National Prosecuting Act, there's a number of deputy NDPPs that can be appointed, and that would sort of constitute the executive team. But as we speak, we have now done almost a reconfiguration of the executive committee, so that it's not only those that are identified in the act. I have said to my team that every area needs to be represented at EXCO.
At executive
so
level.
So that if it's legal, I know that it's in the room. If it's human resources or corporate services, I know that it's in the room. If it's the Office of Ethics and Accountability and so on. So as we speak now, the EXCO is operating and covering the whole business.
I want us to get out of the boardroom and start talk operations out in the field. But one last item, though, that has to do with the structure of the organization, the nature of the organization you lead. Brings me back to the point that I said, let's park for a moment. And it's something that I pick up that you're quite passionate about, institutional independence of the NPA. What do you mean by that? You foregrounded it, and you've said that great strides will be made towards institutional independence. What do you mean by that, juxtaposed against the situation prevailing now? And what would that institutional independence mean for the ordinary South Africans seeing justice being done on the ground?
No, thank you for that question. That is a very important strategic focus areas, amongst other strategic focus areas, right? In the strategy document, we call it operational and financial independence, right? And in fact, I said to our colleagues, perhaps we could tweak the language as we go along, because independence of NPA, it's assumed in fact, provided for, not
Yes.
just assumed,
Yeah.
provided for in the Constitution. Section 179 of the Constitution provides for an independent prosecuting authority for the country. So there's no question that this institution has to be, and it should be, independent. And it's been operating as an independent institution since. So what we are seeking to do at the moment, right, over and above that independence provided in the Constitution, is to, and I use the word corporatize deliberately, because at the end of this process, we should end up with a corporate in terms of the Finance Management Act, Public Finance Management Act, PFMA. That the PFMA provides for entities in government, Schedule 1, 2, and 3, right? Schedule 1 and 2s are those business-based entities, and Schedule 3s are those that really are in the sort of administration, if you like. So the likes of South African Revenue Service, it's a Schedule 3 entity. The likes of the Special Investigating Unit, where I come from, it's a Schedule 3 entity.
Yes.
So, and I really was privileged to be part of these entities that are Schedule 3. I was privileged to be part of the team that formed the South African Revenue Service. And I came from SIU, right? And as I came here, I was pleased that there's this process, because at the moment, NPA operates as a program in the Department of Justice, right? Really nothing wrong with that, but the appropriateness of ensuring that the speed of decision-making, control of budget, and so on. So the corporate that we're looking for at the end will ensure that the governance process of NPA is a standalone. And then you are able to have an accounting officer, you are able to have a control of budget, human resources, and even your facilities. You know, at the moment, we're sort of struggling a bit in terms of making decisions to ensure that our facilities are appropriate. As I went around to the provinces, the prosecutors out there in the field are saying we've got facility issues in the lower courts and so on. You know, it even reminds me when I was a prosecutor in the lower courts, the facilities are still the same. So of course, I met with the facilities team here. We are trying to work around, even in the current governance structure, when we are, because we have to go to the Department of Justice, we have to go to the Department of Public Works and Infrastructure, and so on. Whilst if we were a corporate, we would make a decision to say we need to procure a building, of course, within the budget, and the accounting authority makes a decision, and we go for the procurement process, and the building is procured.
So does it have to do mostly with those governance and management decisions, and nothing to do with political independence and you know, sort of dealing with any perception of, for as long as you are a program within the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development, you want that perception to be there, to not be there, that, you know, you are almost subsumed into what is, at the end of the day, a department headed by a political appointee.
Look, the Department of Justice is, well, if you say headed, I would use the Director General. Is headed by an administrator. Not a politician. So to that extent, as I said, nothing wrong, but we need to corporatize so that we can have our own accounting officer, accounting authority, as the case may be. In terms of political oversight, which is in accordance with the Public Finance Management Act, is called executive authority. Right? The law does acknowledge that there is executive authority required over this executive oversight over this Schedule 3 entities. for SARS, for example, and I always start there. For SARS, because I've got the experience there. For SARS, the executive oversight is the Minister of Finance, right? For SIU, the executive authority is the Minister of Justice. So it will probably be the same with the corporate that we are envisaging for NPA. It will be outside of the public service, but still have an executive oversight of the Ministry of Justice.
All right. Let me ask you then the last question on this aspect. Where are we in terms of the process to realize that?
Yeah.
You had something concrete in mind.
Yes.
And I think perhaps you even had a timeline of how long before we get to this PFMA Schedule 3 entity.
Yeah, I'm glad you've asked that question too. Yes. Because now as they say, the tire has hit the tarmac.
Okay.
So we are busy with the project. We've put together a project team headed by Advocate Maga. There's project members whom we have drawn from various areas of the business. That project is at work at the moment. We've also appointed a legal team, external legal counsel, because ultimately we need to come up with a draft legislation. That draft legislation is currently being worked on. We will benchmark with nationally with other Schedule 3 entities, even with call it Chapter 9 Institute in terms of the structure.
Yes.
But it will probably still remain a Schedule 3 entity. We'll benchmark internationally. By the way, I need to say, this work doesn't start now. For the credit of NPA, it started a while back. I don't know how many years back. So the work has been done. It's not like greenfield, right? So we're really taking the documents that have been worked on. We're ensuring that they are in line with government policy. We are in line with the legislation that we want to reach. So that project has got a timeline of June, July to produce a draft legislation. And the Minister of Justice, and I'm really happy about this, that she has included it in her vote last week when she presented at Parliament, amongst other legislative reforms. This legislation will be introduced in this financial year.
Right.
So that's that's really how prioritized it is.
So we'll be watching that space.
Let's turn
now to the main focus of this podcast. The fight against corruption, complex, organized, and other serious commercial offenses. Tell me where that fits in. Why does corruption, for example, remain one of the most serious threats to our country's democracy?
Thank you for that question again. Corruption, and it's really well documented. And I'm sure the public and those who are listening will know, right? It's been said over and over again, documented and redocumented. Analysts like yourself, presenters like yourself have said it so many times, and I'm sure the public understands it now, that corruption is corrosive. Corrosive in the sense that it corrodes public trust in the institutions. It really affects and eats out on the money that is supposed to be, funding public services, education, health, and so on. And that it happens in the main, in the procurement services, right? Money is lost through corrupt activities, collusive activities in the procurement space, and of course, it's obvious that people who are corrupt will focus on procurement simply because it's where the money is, right? So, and there's various focus areas or entities that focus at that. SIU, one of them, NPA, IDEC, which is an entity in NPA, the Investigative Directorate Against Corruption, the Hawks, the DPCI, SARS itself, and other areas in government. So it is a very, very critical focus so that we continue to rethink our fight against corruption, right? If you look at the strategies that we have put in place now, while we continue to perfect the investigative capability, we must also look at the resourcing of the agencies, NPA in particular. And we have said in the asset forfeiture space, we need to have financial skills, even in IDEC, so that when we investigate and our colleagues who are investigating or prosecuting are faced with, financial documents, financial structures, which can be very complex, they should understand that so that they're able to crack it. At the moment, to a large extent, even in the DPCI, we tend to depend on the private sector, forensic investigations. Nothing wrong again, but we need to build that capability internally. We are seeing, the successes, but those successes are not enough really to create the dent that we want to see on corruption and the consequence management, right? Consequence management being on, if we find that there's wrongdoing, right, between SARS and the asset forfeiture unit, they're focusing on recovering the assets. And we have seen cases, right? Cases on the, for example, in Transnet, right? We've seen the recoveries there. In ESCOM, we've seen the recoveries there. Tembisa Hospital, right? We've seen the recoveries there. Although the public, of course, still calls for more.
Yes.
I always get asked what's happening to what's his name,
Maumela, yes,
and others.
Yes, I'm actually going to ask you about that a bit later on.
The public gets so how do I call it, expectant and impatient. But there are processes that we follow. But we have shown the asset recovery capability, right? So another important part is that we must really step up on ensuring that as we take the assets, we also prosecute.
Yes.
Right? There should be consequence management on the prosecution side, and ensure that as we take the assets, we prosecute and get those people in jail.
Yeah.
Right? So if we are really steadfast at doing that, we are likely to see that we win the war against corruption over time. So that's how important the fight against corruption is.
The other key focus, and I suppose we can say, and it is true, that your prosecutors on a daily basis head out to the lower courts and also the superior courts as well, the high courts, to prosecute multiple matters of a varied kind.
Yes.
But I get the sense that you're also particularly lifting up the issue of organized crime in the country. And you have a strategy that has been in the works for some time.
Yes.
And I think at your briefing in March, you spoke about accelerating the implementation thereof.
Yes.
What can South Africans expect that will signal that Advocate Andy Mothibi is in charge now, and these are the measurables that show us that we not only have a strategy in place that identifies syndicates, kingpins, and the likes, but actually it's being implemented.
Thank you. Thank you for that. As you correctly say, really just to repeat and thank all the committed prosecutors out there and those who are supporting them. By the way, I always include the administration part, because they wouldn't be able to prosecute effectively if they were not supported. As you correctly say, they prosecute cases on a daily basis. There's a publication internally that we issue, I think, almost daily, saying in court today, right? And then we, show matters that have been finalized on that specific day. So that's one of the areas that we need to see how we communicate it outside. Cases convicted, cases tried, sentences meted out, and quite lengthy sentences, right? So the work is continuing. But then those that we have lifted up, like organized crime, right? We've spoken about corruption. Organized crime is one of them, right? We, of course, also taking the lead from the president when he announced at the State of the Nation address that organized crime is one of those crimes that is threatening our democracy, right? And one of the medium-term development objectives is that South Africans, citizens, and all those who are in South Africa should feel safe, right? From criminals, I would say, and we continue to test that. If you go and measure now the perception and the views of South Africans, whether they feel safe, you can guess that you're going to come back with a negative answer.
Yeah.
Right? So organized crime is one of the focus areas. The strategy you refer to, MPA has got the organized crime strategy. which will align with the national organized crime strategy, which is also still underway at the justice, crime prevention, and security cluster.
Yes.
Right. So all these strategies are saying, number one, from NPA, we need to lift up on the prosecutor-guided approach. By prosecutor-guided, we need to work with the investigators so that ultimately when they investigate, they're able to come up with a docket that is court-ready and be able to be put through court successfully, prosecute successfully, right? That approach has been implemented over the years, but we're really now showcasing it, and we are showcasing it highly in the Madlanga Commission outcomes. That is one of the examples, right? That will say the contribution that I continue to implore our colleagues to do, right? You said that will show that, I have arrived, I've been charged, but I always say I work with a team.
Yeah.
I work with a team, and the team is clear that we need to showcase. If you see the results that are coming out of the Madlanga Commission outcomes implementation, it's because there is this collaboration between NPA and the SAPS.
So it's important. I think that's an important point, NDPP. I think the traditional model of anyone who's ever followed how prosecution happens, usually you'll hear the SAPS saying, we've taken the docket to the DPP for a decision. You are saying that actually within the value chain as the work is being done, the DPP, as represented by prosecutors, control prosecutors, etc., plays a pivotal role in how the crime is investigated and how the docket takes shape.
Yes, that is very, very important. I mean, that is a age-old approach. When South Africa started looking at this approach, and at least when I became aware of it around the 90s, right? Amongst other countries where we benchmarked was Germany. In Germany, the guiding of investigations is very, very key. And there, they even get magistrates to guide the investigations. Of course, there's a line between those magistrates that are guiding and those that will ultimately preside, right? But then, as South Africa, we said, prosecutor-guided. There's prosecutor-guided investigator, there's prosecutor-led, right? The methodology that was used by Scorpion, the methodology that's used by IDEC now is prosecutor-led, right? Both of them have got advantages, okay? So the prosecutor-guided, you're correct. It envisages integrated approach between the police and the prosecutor, so that when the docket is taken, it will still be taken for a decision to prosecute, but then it shouldn't get there, and then the prosecutor still writes, instructions, go and investigate this, go and investigate that. That results in a wastage of time. And if you look at how this methodology works, it's meant, amongst others, to obviate the waste of time. So that when the docket is brought now for decision to prosecute, is complete. And this is what we are seeing in the Madlanga Commission. We would like to, of course, to roll it out to other crime types and so on across.
So I've got two questions that are interrelated.
Yes.
Let me start with the one that talks about high-profile cases.
Yeah.
I know that your mantra and your objective is to prosecute without fear, favor, or prejudice. In fact, you are enjoined to do that. So a criminal case is a criminal case.
Yes.
A prosecutor takes it to court. They have the elements. They know what they need to prove to secure a conviction, what the prima facie baseline is. But you and I know that in South Africa, you have those cases where public interest is heightened.
Yes.
How important are those? And do you profile them? And how important are they in ensuring that they are prosecuted properly, such that at the end of the day, if the person is acquitted, everyone is satisfied that, well, the state couldn't prove their case, but they put the case as best as they could. And if there's a conviction, we are all satisfied that indeed this was the person who should have been convicted.
Sure. No, thanks for that. And as you said, there's various of those cases that are in our courts, right? And the one example which I will say, and which also finds itself in the realm of organized crime. We're focusing on extortion, right? We want to make sure that those kingpins, and because part of the organized crime strategy is to focus on kingpins, right? Of course, the foot soldiers will also be arrested and so on, but we must focus on the kingpins, right? The case yesterday, for example, right? That was in Mpumalanga.
Yeah, this is the Kwaggafontein,
yes,
Joseph Banyoni, and
that's
others.
Right.
It involves extortion as one of the crimes.
It involves extortion amongst others. So that is one of the high-profile cases that that we really want to focus at, so that the public can see that we are focusing on these major cases. What happened yesterday was unfortunate, but we are working very hard to get the case re-enrolled. Right? I just spoke to the acting DPP in Mpumalanga this morning. He's busy with the team. When I spoke to him, he was busy with the investigating officer, so that now they get the machinery to re-enroll the case. We are going to make sure that it's re-enrolled. Our prosecutor who was involved, we are also seeking to understand what really happened. And we will take steps that are legally permissible, even if we have to challenge the order that was made by the magistrate. So that's one of the high-profile cases. Another example, I think it's still also in the extortion side. It was a case that appeared sometime last week in the Western Cape. I saw this morning that they were appearing, and it's a bail application. Again, it involves taxi members, taxi industry members. There are about 7 of them, of the accused in Western Cape. Our colleagues there are focusing on that to ensure that it's handled properly towards successful prosecution. Last week, one of the publications was saying, because those accused have been arrested from various provinces, and when that happens and you get them prosecuted in one province, you need what's called a centralization certificate that is issued by the National Director of Public Prosecution. So one of the publications was reporting last week that the prosecution did not produce a centralization certificate, and therefore the case faced being collapsed and so on, which was not correct. And we corrected it. We issued a statement. So the case is underway. The centralization certificate is there. Now the bail application will be opposed, and the prosecution training is one of the focus areas, right? Which we are relentless with the police and all of those that are involved to ensure that we prosecute successfully, because South Africans also really are worried, right? I've seen just this morning or last night one of the illegal minings in other areas where they are really tormenting the communities there, right? So that's one of the organized crime type that we are focusing at. There's other high-profile cases on the corruption side, and Transnet and so on.
If you allow me to just take you back to that incident in Kwaggafontein, you will have seen that part of the dominant interpretation of the events that occurred suggests that this is not mere prosecutor dereliction or delinquents. Perhaps you're dealing with something more sinister.
Right.
And people are openly saying that perhaps the prosecutor was threatened and decided that for my own safety, I'd rather disappear and deal with the consequences with my bosses rather than face this situation. Talk to us about that. 24 hours later, as you and I speak, what are you gleaning into what happened?
Yeah, as I said, I spoke to the acting director of public prosecution with the aim of really following through, so that if need be, we can update the public of what the steps that we have taken so far. So the prosecutor has received a suspension letter, but when I spoke to him, he was indicating that he was still to speak to the prosecutor, because when you're on suspension, of course you've got to be called in and so on, right? So he's gonna call him. He called him in again this morning. I'm expecting a report at 2:00. But what I've picked up in fact, the director of public prosecution is current in Mpumalanga, is currently in Germany. They are on a study trip, right? So that's why we've got an acting DPP. But I got to speak to them while they were in Germany as well with other colleagues. And as they talked to me, is that no, the prosecutor, amongst others, felt unsafe. So that's the information that reached them, right? And then I said it's important that we collate and gather, credible information. We've got a division here that is called Office of Ethics and Accountability. It investigates internally on matters of this nature. So they are on instruction to investigate speedily. I need a report from them that will then inform us. But if it's really around security, we'll get to know when the information is collected. Our internal security here. In fact, last week we had our management committee, and the security department was assuring me that we do act proactively on these high-profile cases. They've got a list of high-profile cases, and they provide security proactively. So my expectation is that they would have come in this case and ensure that the prosecutor gets the protection that's deserving. So we will look at that. So we are going to really be objective as we look at this. If he's found wanting, we'll have to then implement measures, corrective measures.
Right.
All right. But again, we really prioritize security of our prosecutors
because you've had a few prosecutors,
yes.
a few incidents, including the killing of I think two prosecutors.
Two prosecutors in the Eastern Cape. So we do not want that again, and that is why we are really prioritizing the security of our prosecutors. If that was a security issue, then we of course need to understand, from him, and that how is it that we make sure that those security measures are implemented.
Right.
But then we need to also understand the extent to which it was security measure. Who did he inform? So that we don't end up with a situation where the prosecution doesn't rock up at court, which seemed to have been the case yesterday. So we'll get to understand that because it does happen. It does happen that prosecutors, experience incidents which make them unable to reach court.
In fact, as I was walking into the building here, I saw that you have a plaque dedicated to the members of the NPA who have died in the line of duty. That's something you associate more with the police and SANDF, and that talks to the environment in which prosecutors work.
No, indeed, we prioritize prosecutors' security, and of course, in the general security cluster, the security of investigators and prosecutors is utmost.
I do want to move us along because we're going to take some questions from people watching this conversation between you and I in the next few minutes.
Right.
But one or two other high-profile cases. Does it trouble you, and you foregrounded this earlier on, does it trouble you that one Hangwane Maumela, despite being named, even in the work that you previously did in the SIU, and also, everything that has come out of the investigations into syndicates at Tembisa Hospital and the like, he remains not charged. He remains not an accused person appearing in court. Does it trouble you as the NDPP?
Look, we would like matters to be investigated, acted upon speedily, right? If there's a delay, yes, it gets to worry us. When I was at SIU, the investigations were done under my oversight, and that I led the report. I presented the report to the public, where I indicated that Mr. Hangwane Maumela was in one of the syndicates there, right? And we identified the assets that were recovered. So in terms of the criminal investigation, because we get asked that question, I checked with our colleagues here. That matter, in fact, I checked with SIU as well in terms of the referral. The matter is being handled by the Hawks at the moment, because the Hawks was already investigating at Tembisa when we got there. So we engaged with the DPCI, they understand the urgency around this. So when they are done, they will of course hand the docket over to NPA, and will really seek to deal with matter as speedily as possible. So no one should be in any way be seen to be untouchable or above the law. As you correctly said, we execute our mandate without fear, favor, or prejudice. We shouldn't favor anyone. We shouldn't prejudice anyone. So whenever we receive the docket from DPCI around him, we'll treat it like we treat any other docket. But of course, because of the high profile of the matter, we'll deal with it speedily.
Then my last question on the high-profile matters. There was that case of Timothy Omotosho in the Eastern Cape. And I don't know, feel free to tell me if you have not received a briefing in particular on this case, but it talks to the public perceptions and how the handling of one matter can have an effect on public perceptions of work that you were outlining earlier on, that you say actually in terms of conviction rates, you're scoring really highly. But in that one instance that came under the spotlight, public perception is sometimes shaped. When that case ended up in a, in an acquittal in circumstances where the magistrate, or was it, I can't remember, in the High Court, was critical of the prosecution and how it was done. You sought to reserve questions of law. That was not successful. But you also told us that you were going to investigate what happened in the prosecution. How far?
Coincidentally, was it yesterday or day before, where I checked with our Office of Integrity and Accountability. They finalized the investigation. They were investigating the circumstances that occurred in the Omotosho case. We've got the report. We've set up a session where they'll take me through the report. And of course, once I've read the report, looked at the recommendation, we'll then take action. But as you know, amongst others, the accused is no longer in the country. But where it is necessary, of course, we'll kick in the international instruments with relation to mutual legal assistance or extraditions. But internally, the report is ready. We will go through the report and the recommendations. If there's actions that require to be taken against the prosecutors that were involved, we will do so.
Yeah, because the other high-profile issues have sort of been dealt with. Cases such as the Nulane matter. It's now water under the bridge that you were successful ultimately. And that's back on track.
I'm glad
issues
such
as Cholota, for example.
So while we really don't want to be, saying the judiciary was wrong, but we have the opportunity to approach higher courts where they are found wanting, right? So where the decisions are ruled in favor of NPA. So it does show that in some instances you've got these rulings against NPA, but we get to set the record straight where the NPA is vindicated.
So those were my questions. Let's get to the questions of the viewers, people just watching. The first one says, I'm instructed to ask you about the second docket in the Senzo Meyiwa case, whether quote-unquote accused persons in that second docket will appear before the court.
Right. When was it? I think it was yesterday when I spoke to the lead prosecutor, and I also spoke to the acting DPP there. Again, it was in the context of there was a march. I saw publicly that there was a march planned. Planned by the family.
It's taking place today.
Yeah, there was a march planned by the family today to the Union Building. Then I said, hey, colleagues, just let's anticipate when they submit the memorandum at the presidency, they'll probably approach us to find out what's the update, right? And then I spoke to the lead prosecutor and so on. Of course, the case is underway. They're anticipating to conclude the case in this year, all being equal, things going as they planned. But in the legal processes, anything is possible. So they anticipate to They're busy with the cross-examination now of some of the accused or their witnesses and so on. So in terms of the second docket, they will still consider that. They inform me, and of course they will make a decision whether any further charges need to be brought against anyone.
Yeah.
So it's not totally off the radar.
It will come for a prosecutorial decision.
Yes.
Not to you necessarily.
No, not to
but
me.
where the decision is made at the DPP level.
At the DPP level. Yeah.
And then someone wants to know, is it in any way allowed to request the services of magistrates or prosecutors from outside the province of jurisdiction? For example, a magistrate from the Western Cape presiding in a matter in Limpopo due to its seriousness.
It is possible. It is possible, in as much as it is possible to get prosecutors from outside the provinces to be part of the cases in other provinces. Of course, there are legal processes that needs to be followed. I have an experience when I was a magistrate. Would do courts in other provinces, but of course the chief magistrates and so on need to sign off. In as much as when you get prosecutors from outside, the DPPs have to delegate authority appropriately. It is possible, and it happens in the main where there is an apprehension that matters may not be dealt with appropriately when they are not dealt by people from outside.
Yeah.
Right. In some instances, it's possible to take cases themselves from one province and centralize them in another province. Right. So to mitigate any prejudices that may be attendant.
Yeah. There are two questions that have to do with the situation involving the prosecutor in Kwaggafontein. So Let me ask them back to back. Someone wants to know, did anyone establish where the prosecutor is or was? Suppose they're asking physically, where is he or was yesterday? Surely as an employer, you should also be concerned about your members as much as you care about their punishment.
Yeah, no, correctly. Yesterday, we had no information, right? And when we listened to the court proceedings, the information we had was that he was not at court, and the magistrate ended up giving an order of contempt of court, finding him guilty of contempt of court, and also issuing a warrant of arrest, right? And going further and striking the case off the roll, which is something that we are looking from a legal perspective. What is it that's open to us? But again, after the case, we made calls, right, to really find out where the prosecutor is, right? And as at the time we issued a statement yesterday, it wasn't clear where he was, right? But as I said, I even spoke to the DPP who was in Germany, who also got, because I sent him the public statement, right? And he got to discuss it with the colleagues there. So it looks like they made calls as well. And that's where the information around safety came up. So it looks like he was, somewhere where he was safe, but we needed to start doing the check of where he was, right?
Yeah.
Which we were continuing to do. But as of today, he is safe. The acting DPP assured me that he spoke to him, he saw him, gave him the letter, and then he'll continue to engage with him. Just to repeat, for those who are listening and those who ask the questions, we are concerned about the well-being and the security of our prosecutors, right? But of course, where there is an incident that requires us to take action, corrective action or disciplinary action, we will not hesitate to do that, because we expect our prosecutors to observe the highest standard in terms of the prosecutorial code of conduct, right? That's one. So we will not, overlook one over the other, right? While we care very much about their security and well-being, we also care that they should conduct themselves as expected, as officers of the court.
The last question on the score coming from our viewers says, why was there, in fact, this is Moshe Advo Munyai who says, why was there only a single prosecutor assigned to such a big case? And was there no other prosecutor who could have stood in for the one who was absent? So
Right.
I think it's a more systemic issue that
Yes,
says,
yes.
in a high profile case such as this, shouldn't you have had a team of prosecutors led by this prosecutor?
Usually, and of course, he's right? And in fact, in one of the executive committee meetings, we said, we need to firm up on the criteria of, high-profile matters and how is it that we attend to them, right? We will firm up and strengthen the criteria and how to deal. But usually in these high-profile matters, you'll have 2 or even 3 prosecutors. In the Meiwa case, there's about 2 prosecutors. In the Zuma case, where we got the judgment recently in our favor, although they are led by Advocate Downer, but he's got the support there.
Yes.
In a matter like this, in Sibanyoni and others, right? It's a high-profile matter, serious nature, extortion. My expectation is that, because this is now the DPP who would have decided, my expectation is that, similar to the others, there should have been more than one prosecutor. But of course, we'll get the circumstances that prevailed when we get the report.
So was there a lapse as far as that didn't happen?
As I said, I'm waiting for the report. If it didn't happen, I'd like to understand why. As a serious matter as it is, it should have been more than one prosecutor.
My final question before I give you your parting shot, in broad strokes. The era of state capture, to what extent does it remain a frame of reference for you as an organization, both in terms of what the public can expect by way of justice, those referrals coming from that commission of inquiry, but also as far as it relates to the NPA itself as an institution?
Right. I'm glad you've asked that question. The Zondo Commission outcomes, the State Capture Commission outcomes, continue to be monitored so that there's action, so that people can see value for money. In fact, if you look at the recoveries that have been made from Zondo Commission, one colleague yesterday in a meeting was saying the Zondo Commission has paid itself more than 3, 4, 5 times because there's billions that have been recovered, right? But of course, we still expect prosecution, and IDEC is seized with that. There are matters that have been enrolled, there are matters that will be enrolled. We want to see successful prosecution, right? Out of the Zondo Commission, we realized that there was a systemic issue, state capture, which was systemic, right? The National Advisory Council on Corruption that was appointed by the president, chaired by Professor Kachalia, went quite at length. If the public and those who are listening can read that report, it went quite at length in unpacking the systemic issues that were prevalent, right? The collusion between officials and private sector companies, private sector individuals. How is it that they, there was management overrides? How is it that they scuppered, the procurement system and, right? So out of that, because there's now a say that is from a systemic state capture to systems capture, right? If you look at what Madlanga Commission is saying, is revealing now, it's almost revealing a systems capture, right? So we are, and as the president has indicated, once the Madlanga Commission has released the report, there will really be a critical look on how to overhaul, the criminal justice system and putting forward the mitigation plans so that we've got the guardrails and so on. But of importance is to come up with a prevention plan and framework. There is a draft at the moment, the draft National Corruption Prevention and Risk Management Framework. That draft envisages a whole lot of mitigation plans, right? Integrity checks, lifestyle audits, and just continuous checks on officials, including officials of NPA. It also envisages risk management There's a Public Procurement Act that was signed in. I know that it's in court. In fact, as we speak today, some has taken that act to court.
Yeah.
But it is important to do the procurement overhaul, because that's where the monies get stolen, and the National Treasury is really seized with that.
But I've got to press you, NDPP.
Yes.
Your returns versus what was referred for possible prosecution from the Zondo Commission. I think the figure is 3 that have been concluded cases.
Yeah,
I could be wrong,
yeah.
and you'll correct me if I'm wrong.
That's right.
Versus over 100 referrals, was it?
No, look, I mean, the stats are worrying. I must be frank. There's matters that have been enrolled. I think they are, under correction is probably around, 10 or so, or 11. And then those that have been completed are, of course, very much less.
Yeah.
Granted, the stats are worrying. And our colleagues at IDEC, the investigative director herself, is on call on ensuring that we drive that space with speed, right? And of course, the speed doesn't mean we need to compromise cases, okay?
Yeah.
But we need to show results. The public must see that we are acting and acting speedily. Right. So that's what you will see.
Parting short, and I'm being pressed here that I should press you.
Okay.
This coming from one of our viewers who says, when is Advocate Mothibi going to address the millions of complaints against Andrea Johnson?
Yeah. That's a question that we get almost daily.
Yes.
You know, there's non-governmental organizations that really raise those questions with us. As you know, and I'm sure the public is aware, that there's been complaints against her. In fact, she said so when she went to speak at the
investigating director.
Yeah, at the ad hoc committee, she testified there. There's a complaint that she may have misconducted herself in the recruitment of her husband and so on. That investigation has been completed for everyone to know, and we have submitted that to the Minister of Justice, who will, of course, also forward it to the President. So of course, the President will deal with it in accordance with the law. So that part has been addressed.
Okay.
I know that every time we get a complaint, it's almost about that, right? And then there's a organization that has even opened a criminal case, right? I think it's again about that, but again with reference to some of the criminal cases that they're dealing with.
Right.
But that part has been dealt with. The public must really just give the process the opportunity to unfold, and they will see the results.
Sure. So we've covered quite a lot of ground. Let me end it with a parting shot from you for our first episode of season 2. You don't have much time in this position. and that was one of the things that people remarked about when you were appointed. What for you will be the marker of success when you exit the position in a couple of years' time? What would you like to leave behind and say, if I had 15 tasks that I wanted to achieve, but I'll be happy if I will have achieved these 3 or 4?
Number one is really just to contribute to the prioritized crimes that government has prioritized, that NPA succinctly and effectively contributes to dealing with organized crime, either guiding the investigations and, of course, ensuring that there's successful prosecutions of kingpins and all those that are involved. If we can see traction in those matters, that will go a long way, really, in ensuring that the public trust continues on an upward trajectory, right? Gender-based violence, again, one of the prioritized crimes in the country. The women, girls of our country feel so unsafe, right? And we would like to change that trajectory, right? Those who continue to perpetrate gender-based violence must be dealt with and must be dealt with effectively. And again, NPA plays a very critical role. We've got a division, a sexual offences division that deals with that. It deals with the areas like Tutuzela centers that are a flagship for the organization that takes care of the victims, take care of those that have been involved, ensure that witnesses really present their evidence comfortably in court, so that those who are responsible are held to account. Those are the two critical, of course, other crime types. Number two, corporatization of NPA. I think that's
institutional independence.
Institutional independence.
Yes.
I think you're putting it even more better. The institutional independence of NPA. As I said, according to the Constitution, it is independent, and we are executing our work independently. But we want to create a corporate where the speed of decision, the control of resources is within the NPA, and you will see the strengthening of governance, right? Ultimately, of course, we want the institution NPA that operates with the integrity that is expected of it. The issue around integrity, we continue to get reports around some of our prosecutors and so on. And as you indicated, even in yesterday, those kind of perceptions keep cropping up, integrity issues. So if we can really implement the integrity framework that the public expects.
All right. Thank you so much for your time. It's
Thank
really
you.
been,
Thank you very much.
I've really enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you.
National
Thank
Director
you.
of Public Prosecutions, Advocate Andy Mothibi, joining us on episode 1 of season 2 of Graft Under Watch. Thank you for watching and for your participation and posing those questions and making the inputs that you made. From all of us, cheers.